The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Greetings and welcome back to the Personal Safety Show. My name is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor, and I am your host. This segment is going to be devoted to the question of, does the state of Illinois get things right? I can answer that with one resounding word. That answer is no. The state does not get things right. And I'll give you an example. This is not self-defense related, not firearms related, but an experience that I had. After a job loss, I continued to pay child support as I'm supposed to do. I'm a good dad, very, very attentive. As a matter of fact, I took my son on a fishing charter today. Very, very involved in their lives. And the state incorrectly reported to my credit bureaus that I did not pay $21,000 of child support, and my credit score plummeted. This obviously irked me. I tried to work with the Child Support Division of Family Services, and I couldn't get an intelligent person to answer the phone. So I actually had to go to court, and I had to have the judge issue an order that says, no, Marcus is up to date on all of his child support, always has been, and it took months for my credit score to be worked out. Also, there was a provision, just to give you an example, in my divorce decree that said, I'm supposed to provide insurance for the children, and after a job loss, I didn't have that capability. The divorce decree said, in that case, it switches to the mother's insurance. But the state interpreted to go onto the Obamacare, or whatever it's called, the marketplace, and spend thousands of dollars a month because the state mandated that I do so, even though the children were covered without cost. So the state does not get things right. And in speaking on that, I will give you some breaking news. The Dan Calkins case against the state of Illinois about the magazine ruled on by the Illinois Supreme Court. As of today, the recording is done 8/11, and the Supreme Court found that the state's assault weapons ban is constitutional. It overturned a lower court decision. And it was a 4-3 ruling. They said that the circuit court was erroneously entered a summary judgment, and people aren't treated differently. They're grandfathered in if they already own the firearms, and the plaintiffs claim that they do not possess restricted items. They're dissimilar to grandfathered individuals, etc., etc., etc. So the Illinois Supreme Court has ruled that the magazine ban, which limits us to 15 rounds for a pistol and 10 rounds for a long gun outside of the house, as well as a ton of other restrictions and other non-lethal features that make the guns look scary. So Pritzker thought there was less than a 50-50 chance that this was going to be overturned, or that this was going to actually happen, and he was incorrect. It actually had a greater chance. So what's going to happen? Well, Dan Calkins, who is a Republican representative from Decatur, Illinois, is saying that he will go to the federal Supreme Court. And there's a lot of rhetoric, back and forth, etc., etc. Did the state get it right? Absolutely not. And, look at this. There is someone, I can't mention her name on the radio because I don't want to get sued, but someone who is what I will call a crisis actor, was there at the Highland Park parade shooting, then was there when there was allegedly a gun in Highland Park High School, went on vacation to Memphis, and within an hour of a shooting in Nashville, she was in Nashville on the news. That's more than an hour. Suspicious there. Yeah, she's quoted in this ABC article stating that the bill was written with constitutionality in mind. I'm just appalled by this. In other words, the state does not get things right. And there is a process to obtain a FOID card. You have to go online to the Illinois State Police Firearm Services Bureau website. If anyone of my listeners is a gun owner, you already know this. And sometimes the state's records of somebody's background is not accurate. as we will find out from an interviewee who's going to come on in 5-6 minutes. And he was denied his FOID card based upon erroneous information that the state police had entered into his record. Ultimately, it was rectified, but we're going to talk about the cost of how to get that rectified, what steps you need to take, and this is all enumerated on the Firearm Services Bureau website. So as we navigate to that website on my computer, so we're talking about the FOID card, and a FOID card is a firearm owner identification card. There's exemptions. Then there's the CCL, which is concealed carry license. That's a step above the FOID card. And if somebody has an erroneous something on their record, for example, maybe someone was arrested but never convicted, or someone has a inappropriate order of protection in a divorce situation, there is an appeal process. So the people, to be eligible for a FOID card, the person has to not been convicted of a felony, not addicted to narcotics, no patient in a mental health facility in the past 5 years, not intellectually disabled, not an unlawful alien, not subject to an existing order of protection, not been convicted within the past 5 years of violent crimes, to include battery, assault, aggravated assault, violation of an order of protection, or a similar offense that was used in another jurisdiction with a firearm. They cannot have been convicted of domestic battery, aggravated domestic battery, or a substantially similar offense in another jurisdiction. They might not call it domestic battery, but if it's the same offense, someone is disqualified. A non-immigrant visa alien cannot gain access to a FOID card. Also, a minor who's a delinquent minor can't have a FOID card. An adult who's been adjudicated a delinquent minor under the Juvenile Court Act of 1987 for an offense that would be a felony if they were an adult, they're disqualified. In most cases, they have to be a resident of the state of Illinois, not have a mental condition that poses a clear and present danger to the applicant, person, or community, not developmentally disabled, not renounce their citizenship, not dishonorably discharged from the United States Armed Forces, and not convicted of a misdemeanor domestic violence crime. Now, there are people out there who are on anti-anxiety medication, who live a normal life. There are people out there with other psychological issues who live a normal life through therapy and medication. They are certainly able to get a FOID card. In fact, in my travels, I can think of at least 2, possibly 3 people who I have shot with and or trained to shoot with who are on the autism spectrum. And let me tell you, I would much rather go to the range with one of those people who is a stickler for following rules, including safety rules, than a lot of non-spectrum people who are very lazy or lackadaisical. And there are those people out there. So what happens if your FOID gets denied or declined? Well, let's talk about this. First of all, the application has to be done online. It has to be done through the Illinois State Police Firearm Services Bureau website. They would have to appeal to the director of Illinois State Police or the circuit court, whichever is required for their offense. And the director of state police cannot grant relief for some offenses, but the FOID Act says then you can petition the court in your county of residence for those offenses. If you're found innocent, charges were dismissed, or the accuracy of the record is challenged to determine firearm eligibility, an appeal can be done to the Illinois State Police. So it's a form, it's a request for FOID appeal, a request for investigation and waiver of liability, and all required documentation. So if somebody is wrongfully arrested and it's thrown out of court, and I know people that's happened to, this would be one of those things. The required documentation would be something like the court disposition record. So I'll conclude this little discussion by giving you an update on a previous guest, or 3 previous guests from our show. If you remember back, maybe in May-ish, early June, we had 3 individuals from a group called Parents for Securing Our Schools. It is a Highland Park parent group that had been soliciting the schools to put in metal detectors following last year's July 4th shooting, as well as an alleged firearm in Highland Park High School. These parents banded together and started to petition the school board for armed security and putting metal detectors in school. And it was a lot of back and forth. A lot of experts spoke. I went to a rally. Basically, District 113 board approved a rollout of a weapons detection system, that means metal detectors, for the 23-24 school year. And the parents, SOS, Parents for Securing Our Schools, sincerely thanks Dr. Bruce Law and the D113 board for their difficult vote. It was very contentious. The group stands ready to assist in any way they possibly can to ensure a successful rollout at the two high school campuses. One is in Highland Park, one is in Deerfield. So this was earlier this week, Tuesday, August 8th. It was a divided vote, and it approved an initial rollout of a WDS, a weapons detection system. And it came after a presentation from the superintendent, Dr. Bruce Law, that lasted nearly 2 hours. He presented several other vital security measures that are going to be included in the district's upcoming school year plan. This is wonderful. The other safety items, which this group fully believes will significantly improve overall safety and security at their high schools, were voted on and unanimously posted by the board. So Dr. Law said that 77% of the parents in that district and students were in favor of implementing metal detectors from a survey conducted in May. And they actually listened to the survey. Parents for SOS did their own research on the effectiveness of weapons detection systems in high schools, and they believe that the board will prevent another incident, such as the firearm in the school from April 4th at security breach. So they're very, very grateful. There was a lot of emotion on both sides. There was a lot of hurt feelings on both sides. But as parents, they discussed at length with their own children about the possibility of metal detectors. And they believe that the students are going to be resilient and they're going to have traumatic memories from the April 4th lockdown, the July 4th parade, even if they weren't there. The victimization is beyond just the people that were at the parade. It's their family members. It's the people that were injured. There are medical professionals who were psychologically affected. Absolutely. So everyone's relieved and less anxious to begin school on August 16th, even though the full implementation is just a little bit time off. You can't just snap your fingers like in Star Trek and replicate whatever you need to replicate in the ship replicators. I know that was an obscure reference to Star Trek. So there you have it, folks. Now we're going to hear from Clark Collins. And Clark had his firearm rights restricted. They are now fully restored, and you are going to get to hear his story. With me, I have Clark Collins, who recently had his firearm rights reinstated. Clark, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Can you tell our listeners what is your origins, your life story, your origin story, where you went to college, what you do now, family man, that type of thing? Tell us who you are.
Absolutely. So again, my name's Clark Collins. I'm originally from Evanston, Illinois, and I went to the University of Illinois on a full ride to play football. I got done with college, moved to Chicago, lived in the city for quite a few years, got into medical supply business, opened my own company, met my wife, married, have 2 children now. I have a 5-year-old daughter and I have a 4-year-old son. And that's about my story here.
Fantastic. There's another connection with us I'll share with my listeners. I met Clark and his wife, and it turns out my cousin was one of his wife's teachers in high school, which is kind of funny. It's just a small world. You applied for your FOID card, and you were declined.
Correct.
Why were you declined?
So in 2015, my wife and I were getting married, moving out of a high-rise downtown Chicago into a townhome in Logan Square. Through that process, I didn't feel fully safe with myself traveling quite a bit for business. Decided it would be best to have a firearm in the home. God forbid something happened, my wife has an opportunity to defend herself. I filed for my FOID card in 2015. Shortly after 2015, I received a letter in the mail stating that I was denied that FOID card due to some incidents in my background. Never fully dug into it. I was pretty disappointed, put everything down. Ultimately, my wife got her FOID card, and we had a firearm to protect ourselves in the home after that. About a year ago, I decided to dig into why I was denied that FOID card finally. Upon digging into everything, I realized that the Illinois State Police had the incorrect information. In my early 20s, my late teens, unfortunately, I was a knucklehead, got into a bad fight, was on the winning end of that fight, but then paid the price for quite a few years. To make a long story short, ISP had me down as a felon, which I am not a felon. After discovering this issue, I went to the courthouse and paid for all of my court documentation from all of my issues and tried to figure out how best I appeal based on the denial. Through that process, I did quite a bit of research online to find out, do I need an attorney? Can I do this on my own? I determined that it would probably be best with the support of an attorney. I found an attorney online and reached out to him, had quite a bit of conversation with him prior to moving forward. Finally hired him and his staff, and we put together an appeal package, for lack of a better way to say it. Through that package, I was strongly encouraged to have some letters of recommendation written on who I am now as a man, who I've been as a man the last 20 years since this issue has occurred. So with the help of some very kind folks, I put together this package, some of these letters of recommendation, and we submitted it to ISP in October of 2022. It was quite a lengthy wait time, no communication back from ISP. You email, it takes 3 months for them to email you back a one-line sentence. They never answer the phone. They never return any phone calls. You're kind of sitting in the dark just waiting. Through that process, in May, got an email stating that my FOID portal had been updated. I logged in, and ISP reversed the decision on the denial and approved my FOID card based on having the correct paperwork showing that I was not a felon. So I was able to get my FOID card reinstated in May.
Fantastic. So couple points I want to reiterate that you've talked about. It took about 6-7 months.
Correct.
That's actually pretty darn good for the state of Illinois. Not satisfactory to citizens, but on their end, 6 months is actually very good. I know people that have waited a year plus. One guy, 2 years, he still hasn't had his FOID card back, and he was the victim of a crime, wrongfully charged, and it was dismissed. So this took 6-7 months. How much did the attorney cost?
The attorney cost me $3,500.
For a right that the state has incorrect paperwork on.
Correct.
I truly believe that if that happens, the state should reimburse you for your attorney fees, but who am I?
I completely agree with that. It's very frustrating being treated that you're not allowed to have access to your amendment rights when they've made the mistake. Yes, I made a mistake in my 20s, as a lot of people have. Ultimately, I grew out of those experiences, and those troubles never followed me. So to be treated in that capacity was very frustrating. And yeah, I think they should reimburse based on their incorrect paperwork.
Well, they spend a lot of money on other crap. All right, so I'm kidding when I say that. Would you recommend your attorney to other people?
I would. I absolutely would. I think he did a heck of a job for me, and I think it was well worth the money in order to have my rights reinstated.
What was your attorney's name?
The firm I hired is Williams and Nickel. They did a heck of a job. They have an entire team after meeting with the initial attorney that puts together all of the information that you're going to need. They did a heck of a job. I would absolutely recommend them.
Not to pick on real estate attorneys, but this is just general advice for our listeners. You want to have an attorney with a specialty in the area that you need help with. So you don't want to have a real estate attorney doing a FOID application for you.
That's
Makes
right.
sense. So you want to have them in their areas of expertise. What final thoughts can you share with our listeners about getting their firearm rights reinstated?
There's a lot of frustration through the process, but I would not give up. At the end of the day, this is your Second Amendment right as a citizen. And as the world continues to get crazier and we have a lack of ability for the police to actually police and lock these criminals up, I think it's imperative to protect yourself, to protect your family. And to me, that's the most important thing, is to not give up in order to get your FOID card reinstated. And don't take no for an answer. We've all got a past, and we hope that we've learned from that past. And you should not be judged as a grown man of what you did as a kid. And the biggest thing for me is don't give up and don't let them frustrate you. Continue to fight a good fight and get after your Second Amendment right.
You mentioned as police departments are not as effective as they used to be, a lot of people blame the police for crime. That's like blaming your doctor for illness. They're part of the solution, not the problem. But there are several landmark cases with the Supreme Court. One of them is DeShaney versus Winnebago County Department of Social Services. And that's a Supreme Court case. I actually posted this on one of my business networking groups, and it was taken down because my post quoting the federal Supreme Court was insulting to someone. They couldn't believe I would post that the police do not have a duty to protect you. I wasn't giving an opinion. I was sharing exactly what the court had said. So people should understand that the police do not have a duty to protect you. They have a duty to protect society. If you have questions on reinstating firearm rights, I would suggest that you go to the following website, www.isp, as in Paul, FSB, as in boy. It stands for Illinois State Police Firearm Services Bureau. And you're going to be looking for the FOID FAQ, which lists how to apply for a FOID reinstatement. Again, if you have questions on the process, you can always contact me through my website, www.firearmmentorcard.com. So Clark made a couple comments that the man he is today is not the man he was when the testosterone was running through his veins when he was in his early 20s. I was the same way. What are you doing now? Can you explain your real estate endeavors and the medical supply business that you are the CEO of?
Absolutely. I started a medical supply company in 2011, primarily focusing on disposable medical supplies, anything a physician, a doctor's office is going to use, throw away, and need to replace. I launched this company from the living room of my condo downtown Chicago, organically grew it, and traveled to Iowa to strum up some business, Indiana, as well as Wisconsin. So I've been running this company since 2011. We do about 8 to 9 million in sales annually. So we're a small company, but we pack a good punch in terms of our offerables, in terms of our customer service. We've done a great job growing that. In fact, my sister, who's my office manager, used to be a Lake Forest police officer. So I've got a bulldog watching over the back end of everything, and it's been great working with family. Through that, I've gained some curiosity in real estate after purchasing a home in 2016 that was fully remodeled. And essentially, I bought a pig with lipstick on it. Wound up fixing about every single aspect of that home. It left a very bad taste in my mouth, not only for builders, also but for realtors. Realtors not protecting you, telling you certain things that you probably should know as a consumer from a professional standpoint. Through that, I decided to throw myself in school and take my real estate exam, pass that, and gotten involved with a couple different investment properties. Real estate's been good. You look at anybody who builds a nice retirement for themselves and their family, most of it is built through real estate. So I'm praying God is good to me and gives me an opportunity to continue to work. And yeah, real estate's been absolutely wonderful in this crazy market. But yeah, if you'd like to check out more information on any of my companies, my company with the medical supply is Big Ten Supply, BIGTENSUPPLY.com is the website. So www.BIGTENSUPPLY.com. And then if you'd like to take a look at what I'm doing with real estate, please feel free to check out my website, which is clarkcollins@kw.com, and that's spelled ClarkCollins@kw.com.
I have a couple off-script questions for you. How difficult was the real estate exam?
It wasn't difficult at all. I think I was most nervous about being back in school for 8 to 9 hours for 2 weeks in a row. I took an accelerated class where most people are taking this over an 8-week period between the children and my medical supply business. I didn't have that time. It took a lot of effort and energy at home in my off hours to dive into books, do quizzes. But with anything, you prepare and you put yourself in the real situation. You start having muscle memory take over. And, not to sound arrogant, I thought it was pretty easy, to be honest with you. A lot of it is common sense, which is a lot of business. But nowadays, common sense ain't so common, as my father used to say.
I'm going to end on a lighthearted note, and I'm going to tease you. You went to U of I, and your business is Big Ten school. My wife went to Kansas, and I make a joke with her all the time. She just retired her Kansas sweatshirt, and now she's looking for another one. I say, people who went to Kansas, they never graduate. And my wife says, well, of course I graduate. Of course she did graduate. But I'm like, no, they're always on basketball, rock, chalk, Jayhawk. So did you graduate from college, or are you just living your college days? I'm teasing. It's a rhetorical question. Obviously, you graduated, and it was a very good influence on you. Clark, thank you for taking the time today to talk to our listeners, share your experience. And once again, if anyone has questions, they can go to Big Ten Supply. The 10 is spelled out, big10supply.com, or clarkcollins.kw.com.
We have monthly concealed carry license CCL classes in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. Dates can be seen at firearmmentor.com/classes. If you have a question, we can be reached at www.firearmmentorcard.com. That is our electronic business card, has all of our contact information and links in it. It's the easiest way to get a hold of us. Until next time, stay safe out there, and I'll see you at the shooting range. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor signing off. The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.